Hey, stop scrolling for a second, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's something that happened in a house full of marble floors and CCTV. If you believe in kindness, kindly watch till the end and comment if it's worth your time, and also comment the country you're watching this video from. Thank you. Nathaniel Bishop had built an empire on foresight, control, and the belief that enough preparation could keep the people he loved safe from anything. Those same instincts were the reason his house was lined with tiny, hidden cameras, not out of paranoia about his money, but out of fear for his son. Rowan Bishop had been 12 years old when a driver ran a red light 3 years ago and shattered more than his spine. It shattered the version of the world Nathaniel had believed money could protect. Since that afternoon, the house had filled and emptied of doctors, therapists, and caregivers, cycling through like seasons. Some were kind, some were careless. A few were simply there for the paycheck, and it showed in the small ways that never made it into any incident report. A raised voice caught by accident on a baby monitor, a rough tug on a wheelchair handle, a physical therapist who skipped exercises the moment she thought no one was watching. Every one of those small failures had chipped something away from Nathaniel's ability to trust a stranger inside his own home. So he'd hidden cameras in corners, inside lamp bases, along bookshelves, small, silent, always recording, and told himself it was only ever about Rowan's safety. He rarely watched the footage anymore. Watching his son's daily struggle through a lens felt too much like reopening something that hadn't finished healing. When the last caregiver quit, citing exhaustion, the emotional kind, the kind that comes from caring for someone in a house where nobody quite trusts you, Nathaniel hired a replacement without much thought. He needed a body in the house by Monday. That was all. Her name was Sloan Doyle. She was quiet in the interview. Her resume was plain, her references brief but sincere, no polish to any of it. She didn't stare at the marble or comment on the size of the house the way most people did. She asked exactly one question. Does Rowan like music? Nathaniel barely registered it at the time. He answered something vague. He didn't actually know. He realized later, and that not knowing sat with him longer than he expected. The first week passed without incident. Sloan kept the house spotless, cooked simple food, followed Rowan's schedule to the letter. Nathaniel, buried in bored calls and late-night emails, barely crossed paths with her. But Rowan seemed different. The boy who'd spent 3 years answering questions with shrugs and one-word replies started lingering in the kitchen doorway when Sloan hummed while she cooked. His eyes tracked her across the room with a curiosity Nathaniel hadn't seen in years, not since before the accident, when Rowan used to narrate entire imaginary basketball games to himself in the driveway. Nathaniel noticed. He didn't ask about it. He told himself he was too tired, too busy, that it wasn't his business how his son spent his afternoons as long as he was safe. One evening, home earlier than usual, restless in a way he couldn't name, Nathaniel opened the camera feeds for the first time in months. He expected nothing. Maybe that was why what he found unsettled him so deeply. On the screen, Sloan sat cross-legged on the floor beside Rowan's wheelchair. Not doing therapy, not talking, just sitting there, matching her breathing to his, palms flat against the cool tile, eyes closed. After a long moment, she said something too quiet for the microphone to catch clearly. Rowan's shoulders, always tense, always braced for something, slowly dropped. Nathaniel leaned closer to the screen without realizing he'd moved. Sloan began tapping softly against the floor, a rhythm so gentle it barely registered as sound. Then she reached into her bag and handed Rowan 2 wooden spoons. He hesitated, confused, tapped them together, once awkward. Sloan smiled, not the practiced smile of an employee performing patience, but something raw underneath it, and tapped back. A rhythm formed, clumsy, then steady. Rowan laughed. Nathaniel froze at his desk. He hadn't heard that sound, the real, unguarded, forgetting to be careful kind, in months. Maybe longer than that. This wasn't in any care manual. It wasn't a listed therapy technique. It was connection, plain and unscripted, and Nathaniel had no idea what to do with the fact that he'd needed hidden cameras to witness it. He watched more over the following nights. He told himself once, then never again, and kept opening the feed anyway. Sloan never knew. He watched her read to Rowan, not picture books, but adventure novels with cracked spines, pausing every few pages to ask what he would have done differently if he'd been the hero. He watched her guide him through exercises long after the physical therapist had gone home, turning each repetition into something closer to a game, celebrating the effort of the attempt rather than whether it succeeded. He watched her learn, without anyone telling her, exactly which parts of the day were hardest for his son, mornings, mostly, and any moment right after Rowan caught his own reflection in a window at an angle he wasn't expecting. Then came the night that broke something open in Nathaniel that 3 years of careful control had kept sealed shut. It was late. The living room camera caught Rowan mid-collapse, fists clenched in his lap, voice shaking with a frustration he almost never let himself say out loud. "I hate this chair," he sobbed. "I hate being stuck." Nathaniel's whole body moved toward the stairs before he stopped himself, some instinct telling him this wasn't a moment that needed a father barging in. He stood frozen at the top of the staircase instead, watching through the monitor in his hand. Sloane knelt down in front of Rowan, bringing her face level with his. She didn't rush to contradict him. She didn't offer the kind of hollow reassurance Nathaniel had heard a dozen therapists default to over the years. "I know," she said simply. Then she did something Nathaniel never would have predicted. She took Rowan's hands and placed them against her own legs. "Tell me what you miss," she said. Rowan faltered. Then, barely audible, "Running." Sloane nodded, unbothered, and guided his hands to her knees as she slowly shifted her weight from one leg to the other. "Then feel this," she said. "This is movement. Different doesn't mean gone." She narrated every small motion as she made it, the shift of weight, the flex of muscle, as if inviting him into a sensation he could no longer access on his own, but could still, somehow, borrow. Rowan's breathing slowed. His eyes stayed fixed on her hands guiding his. When she finished, she said quietly, "Your body remembers. We'll remind it together." Upstairs, alone, Nathaniel felt his vision blur, and for the first time in 3 years, he let himself cry without immediately reaching for a way to fix it. In that moment, watching a stranger give his son something no specialist, no security system, no amount of money had ever managed to give him, Nathaniel understood something humbling. He had protected Rowan from harm for 3 years. He had never once given him hope. Sloane had done it without knowing anyone was watching at all. The next morning, Nathaniel called Sloane into his office. She stood calmly, hands folded, bracing. He could tell, for some kind of criticism. Instead, he confessed everything. The cameras, what he'd watched, how long he'd been watching without telling her. He expected anger. He would have understood it. Sloane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, simply, "I'm glad you saw the real him." Nathaniel offered her more money. A new contract. Anything she wanted, he told her, and meant it. She shook her head. "Just let me keep helping him," she said. "Not as a job, as a promise." The cameras stayed after that, but something in how Nathaniel used them changed. He stopped watching out of fear that something might go wrong. He started watching to learn. The way Sloane phrased things, the specific patience in how she waited for Rowan to find his own words instead of finishing his sentences for him. The way she never once treated his frustration as something to be managed rather than felt. Rowan started physical therapy again with a different kind of determination. Not because he believed he'd be walking again by some fixed date on a calendar, but because for the first time since the accident, he seemed to believe he was more than the thing he'd lost. Weeks turned into months. Rowan returned to school 2 mornings a week, then 3, wheeling himself down a ramp he used to avoid looking at entirely. His teachers mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd started raising his hand in class again. Nathaniel heard it secondhand and had to sit with it for a while before he trusted himself to believe it. The house itself changed in ways that had nothing to do with therapy schedules. Laughter started showing up in rooms that had gone quiet 3 years earlier. Sloane and the housekeeper argued cheerfully over whose turn it was to pick the dinner playlist. Rowan started asking Nathaniel, unprompted, about his day. A small thing, an ordinary thing, the kind of thing Nathaniel hadn't realized he'd been grieving the absence of until it came back. Almost a year after Sloane first walked into that interview and asked the only question that mattered, Nathaniel found himself standing in the doorway of the living room, watching his son and Sloane tap out a new, more complicated rhythm on 2 wooden spoons that had, at some point, become permanently retired from kitchen duty. Rowan looked up and caught him watching. He didn't flinch, the way he might have a year earlier, self-conscious about being seen struggling. He just grinned and held out a third spoon. "You're terrible at this," he told his father. "Sit down. I'll teach you." Nathaniel sat. He thought about the cameras humming quietly through the walls of the house. The ones he'd installed because he believed control was the same thing as protection. He understood now, watching his son count out a beat with more patience than Nathaniel had ever managed to teach him, that he'd had it backward the entire time. Safety had never been the thing keeping Rowan whole. Trust was. And somewhere between a stranger's one small question in a job interview and a rhythm tapped out on 2 wooden spoons, Nathaniel Bishop, a man who had spent his whole life believing money could buy certainty, finally learned the difference between watching over someone and actually seeing them.